us for Training Thursday. Really excited to have you step in with us, even though it's not in the office. We'll have to owe you a lunch.
I know you're good for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So typically, kind of the format we like to follow here is just kind of introduce you a little bit, give a little bit of background on yourself, a little bit about your story, what you do, what's a typical day in the life of Stephen McGill, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then I'll have some questions, and then maybe we'll open up the floor to some of our team members if they want to ask any questions.
Sure.
Cool.
Yep.
So for anybody who doesn't know, Stephen and I first met probably, maybe it's got to be 6 years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago at least.
Oh yeah.
So I think I had actually somehow connected with Stephen on LinkedIn, reached out to him, and we had a coffee at Starbucks and chatted. And for me, it was kind of a cool opportunity to meet someone who, clearly had been in the industry for a number of years, had a lot of, respect and was well known in the community. And for myself, just starting a business, I think that was really cool to kind of, meet and get some feedback. And, you gave me a lot of initial feedback, which is cool, and even gave us an opportunity to work on, I believe it was Cafe Ottawa. It was the small business enterprise. So we did some social media stuff there and maybe some paid ad stuff. So that was my first intro, but over the years, I think we've worked on a number of projects together. And some of the team members might know you. It's really, really cool to have you here. Maybe just start off, tell us a bit about yourself and a little bit about Stephen.
Sure. Well, I've been, as Brock said, I've been doing this for a while. I went to school started school at Carleton University. My intention was to follow my dad's wishes and go into law. And I'd read a lot of law books, so I thought it was kind of fun to do that. But I sort of changed careers, and after reading a book called Confessions of an Advertising Man, and went to Algonquin College, graduated from their creative advertising program, and kind of worked in back then. I worked in the traditional advertising agency, so I started as a copywriter, but I did some account work as well, and then worked my way up to full-time copywriter, then a creative director, and I became a partner in an agency when I think I was about 26 or 27. I was offered a partnership. Did that for a while, and then went out on my own. So along with Nadine Buckley and my brother Brian and Nadine's sister Kim, we formed McGill Buckley in 1996. So our approach to things is we both came from larger agencies. At the agency I was a partner in, I think was 45 or 50 people at one point, and Nadine worked in a large company too. So we have kept our company small on purpose. It's really just Nadine and I at this point, working with my brother still involved from the financial aspect, but we work with partners like SEO Plus throughout Ottawa. But we kind of focus on two things that we think clients look for. One is the strategy side. We find that a lot of clients we work with are really, really tactical, and they quite often have business issues or some sort of issue that they're trying to tackle. So we come at it from a strategic standpoint. But the second thing we try and focus on is the idea of creative work. So my background, as I said, is a copywriter, creative director. So I still do a lot of that work. And Nadine is a terrific art director and designer. So that's kind of how we position ourselves, because a lot of clients have difficulty with those two tactics. They can have general business strategy, so business plans and things like that, but how to take strategy and execute it from a creative standpoint. So for instance, we do a lot of work in writing brand strategies and communication plans, and I'm doing more and more social media strategy writing. We're working on a fun campaign right now that's going to recognize volunteers across Canada. So we've helped with the messaging and strategy around that. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, we do. Our niche is probably hospitality. Not a great niche to be in right now, but a lot of not-for-profit, a lot of healthcare in general. But we also we work with people that we like to work with, so we don't sort of close the doors on people that are just great clients to work with. So Cardell's a perfect example of that.
Yeah,
just a fantastic company, great culture to work with, and we've got a few other people like that we work with. So that's kind of a bit about me.
That's wicked. So how did you, I know you have a lot of not-for-profit clients. You mentioned some hospitality. How did you kind of focus in on one specific target or smaller segment?
Well, it was interesting when we did our original business plan, when we set up the company. Not-for-profit was something that we always wanted to be involved in, because I grew up in a family with, especially my mother, who was, she didn't sit on boards, but she was involved in bake sales and book sales and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we believe that, if we're going to have a successful business, you have to contribute to the community. So that the not-for-profit part of it was right from the get-go. And it's funny, before we really had any clients, the first thing we did was I wrote and helped direct a video for cancer patients for the Royal Cancer Foundation. And it just sort of took off from that. We started doing more and more volunteer work, and then we got called in to do some work with, the Cancer Foundation was one of them, but it's been a lot of healthcare since then. So it just kind of took off.
Yeah. And Dave Smith's Youth Treatment Foundation, you've been involved with that over the years? Yeah,
for a long time. And that was again, just, a guy I knew in the business network who called me up and asked if he could buy me a beer, and I'll never say no to that. And he said they were having issues with communications. Great little organization that helps kids with mental health and substance abuse issues. And he asked if we'd help. So that started. I sat on the board and did that.
Absolutely, that was cool. Well, I think we worked on that, on getting the Google Ad grant some years ago, right? Back in the day.
Yeah.
That was the first.
Yeah.
So how did you've obviously been in the industry for a long time, 20 plus years, right? How did you originally get into like creative and marketing? Like, how did you?
Well, it's kind of funny. I mean, I was an Air Force brat, so we lived all over the place. And when I was living in Montreal, I originally thought that I wanted to be a sports journalist. Because I was at the time a newspaper and sports rat, so I would get up and read. And I just discovered some fantastic sports writers around North America that really, not only did they know sports, but they really had a gift of language. And I was always a big reader. So that was my original plan. And then I kind of realized that, that's a tough field to be in, especially as you get, you start a family and you start to do that kind of stuff. You're traveling all the time.
Yeah.
So that was kind of job number one that I was looking at. And then, I listened to my father and I thought, I'll just go into law. You can make a lot of money. And I started down that road. And part of my research was interviewing lawyers. And I found out there were way too many of them made lots of money, but weren't really that happy. So I kind of figured I wanted to have a job where I could, love of writing, love of thinking, that you could take advantage of that. And I read a book by David Ogilvy about advertising, and I stumbled across the advertising program at Algonquin College, and I just on a whim applied and got in.
So, and you ended up working for quite a large agency. You said 45, 50 people.
Yeah.
What was the first position you were hired for there?
Well, I was hired as a junior account person.
Like sales, account management type of thing, or?
Yeah, one of our big accounts at the time was the Bay.
Okay, yeah.
So I worked with a more senior guy, and we went out to get beat up by the client every once in a while. But it was that was part of it. But I made it pretty well known that that was my foot in the door to an advertising. Sure. And I was really lucky. The guy who was the creative director at the time was just an incredibly kind guy, and he just took me under his wing and taught me all kinds of stuff about creativity and gave me a shot at writing some stuff, which I wanted to do. So it kind of took off from there.
That's cool. So how long were you at that first agency for?
I'm going to say about 2.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, but 2.5 years. Then they changed direction and they went strictly to like a production publishing house, and I had no real interest in that.
Yeah.
So I left there and got a job working for a lunatic, but it was a great experience. There was lots of hands-on stuff, and I ended up running the creative department at the time. I was like 24, and it was, I was in way over my head probably, but it was just a great experience. So we were working a lot of technology clients, some retail clients, some hospitality clients. So it was fun.
So you took on a lot more responsibility at a young age, kind of figured it out.
Yeah. As I said, the guy who ran the place was a really unusual guy, and he would disappear for like 3 days at a time. and nobody knew where I was. So I
Yeah.
found myself, not only trying to get the creative work done, but approving expense accounts and all kinds of stuff. So it was
Oh, wow.
fire.
I'm sure it helped over time though, being able to get garner that experience, right? Not ideal, but
Well, you know what? Sometimes you get thrown into a situation and you just have to learn something from it. So it was, at the time it was a little crazy, but I was, young, single, and didn't really have any other things to worry about. So it
for
was
sure.
it was fun.
And you have 2 kids now?
Yes. Yeah.
2 kids? Okay. And you were born, where were you born? Was it France?
I was born in France. Yeah. Yeah. My
Okay, wow.
dad was in the Air Force. We moved when I was growing up until I was about 17, we moved every 3 years.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know you work with a number of clients here locally and even nationally.
Yep.
Tell us about an interesting marketing campaign you worked on. Like, what's the most interesting one you've ever done?
That's a great question. One of the ones I think about, and this goes back a few years ago, and I've always been the kind of person that loves a challenge. And a number of years ago, we got hired by the Spark Street Mall Merchant Authority. And they were, I mean, the Spark Street Mall has a history of just up and down, right? They never quite know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So they brought us in to help them with their advertising and marketing. And at the time, I think they had an annual budget of about, I'm going to say around $100,000, which is not a great deal of money. And if you know the Spark Street Mall, they're 300 yards from the Rideau Center, which at the time had an ad budget of about $1.2 million a year. So we just went to them and said, you've got to do something that's really out there, that's really different. You've got to be more noticeable than your budget allows you to be.
Mm-hmm.
So we developed this campaign that featured all these different independent merchants, because we went, that's the difference you have.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it was primarily a print campaign that we did, print and outdoor, and it just sort of blew up in terms of getting noticed, because some of the headlines were a little on the edge. We were actually surprised they got approved, but the campaign just blew up, and we ended up getting interviewed by a TV station in Dallas and a magazine in LA. Sort of, we figured it out that the campaign was about $100,000 spend, but in terms of earned media, it probably got close to $1 million.
Wow.
But there's a funny part too to this story, is that, so it was the board of directors that hired us. And this campaign just got really noticed all over the place, I said. So the next year they had an entirely new board of directors, and one of them thought our campaign was a little too risque. And we were called in for a meeting, and they said, what would you change about the campaign? And we said, nothing. We're not going to change a thing. And they fired us. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, it was kind of,
you can't always win, right? Even when you win, you can't win.
You can't win.
So, I mean, that kind of ties into my next question a little bit. Is I don't want to say the question is, what's the hardest part of your job? I don't think you have a job. I mean, I think you have a passion that you kind of live every day, right? More than anything. But what's the hardest part of that? Like running a company and managing clients.
I think, and I can't remember who said this to me, but it has stuck with me, is that almost every problem you have, whether it's in a job or running a business, it's a people problem, right? Mm-hmm. It comes down to managing people. And when I say managing people, it's not, having them under your thumb. It's understanding where people are coming from. So I think that's a big part of it. I think we try to spend the time getting to know who we're working with, like you guys, or their clients. And it's just understanding, their levels of expectation, their levels of involvement, and making sure that doesn't get in the way of actually doing the work. And I find that, if when you get into problems, it's problems around things that aren't necessarily work related. A perfect example in our industry is that, we do a lot of creative work. And, my partner Nadine's been a designer for a long time, and she's a fantastic designer. I've been writing for a long time, and I think I'm pretty decent at it, that people love to micromanage that process. They love to get involved. So that's the toughest thing, right? So you need to sort of, I'm going to say, put them in their place. Yeah. But you need to establish boundaries. And we say that with a lot of people is, we'll do our work, we'll respect you as a client, or we'll respect you, but let's not step on each other's toes. So I think managing people is the toughest part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to your point, specifically with clients, I think it's building that trust and, asserting yourself as this is my experience and this is why you're bringing me in, right? And like, this is how I can help. Trust me to do it right, and the challenge with things like creative, visual, I think there's a lot of, it's open to interpretation, right? Everyone has a different opinion, right? So that's one of the challenges I found, for example, like with web design. I mean, writing is similar, but web design, anything like that, it's so subjective. You can do what you agree to do in terms of, we'll do your mock-up, we'll do this and the other. Doesn't mean they're going to like it, right?
Exactly.
But also a lot of that goes back to, like you said too, dealing with people, communication, right? So something kind of our business coach, always talking about is did you demonstrate value, right? You might have offered value, but did you communicate it, right? So I think that's a big thing, and especially with what's going on right now, I think, like you're saying, people is everything right now, right? Your clients, everyone is human. Sometimes, when 2 months ago where everything's going crazy, everyone's busy with their lives, and so much going on. Now that everyone's had a chance to take a step back, talking to your client, talking to with your employee, whoever it is, we're all human, right? And it's all about communication and talking to people. Everyone's different, but I think it's all kind of brought us closer together too, right?
Yeah, I think so, and I think I think a lot of this, as crappy as this time is right now, I think it's teaching us a lot of us a lesson that you need to step back, and we've been trying to do that. I mean, just before I got on this call with you, we were doing something for our hotel clients. They got no money, but they need to do something, right? And you just try and put yourself in their shoes and go, what would it be like to have a job for 19 years and then all of a sudden it's gone through no fault of your own? So that's the part of it. As I said, it's all about people in what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talking about clients and especially in with what's going on right now too, what's your approach? Are you continually reaching out to people? You mentioned you're helping them in different ways. What's some tips you can give to our team, like how they can interact with clients kind of right now and just in a typical day?
I mean, we've continued to reach out. You can always do better. I mean, one of the things that we've always tried to do is to build a network, and stay in touch with people. I mean, you can have a bunch of connections on LinkedIn, but I always go, there's probably a core of people that you want to pay attention to. I mean, frankly, Brock, you're on my list that way. Is that you just make sure you're staying in touch with people, and paying attention. So we've reached out. I'm trying to reach out to at least one person a day.
Yeah.
And you've got family to worry about too, but try to reach out to people. And if you pay attention to it, to what's going on. There was a guy who's not even a connection of mine who posted something on LinkedIn this morning. His name is Ed Hansen.
Yeah, and he's our client.
Is he?
Yeah,
He posted something about remaining positive. And I just thought it was such a great message. So even though we're not connected, I thought I'm just going to send him a note going, bravo, because there's way too much doom and gloom.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Actually, so I don't know if Catherine's on the call. I don't think she is, but it's her dad.
Oh, it's all right.
Yeah, small world.
He's just a great guy, but I think it's it's being genuine, and it's it goes beyond business.
Yeah.
And sometimes the stuff that's beyond business actually affects business. If you even putting this side of time, you see how people react to things, That's,
absolutely. And I'll tell you, the past month has been, for me, it's been 8 years we've been in business. This has been the hardest month by far. For anyone, right? And just for us to see the way our team, for example, we've always worked in an office together.
Yep.
Now everyone's remote and kind of disconnected a bit. But everyone's trying to stay in touch on Slack by Google Meets and, working together on things. I'm so proud of the team with how they've all pulled together, and people are working their asses off right now, for their team and for their clients. And it's really again, in such a difficult situation to see that, it's really nice to see.
I think we're discovering how resilient we can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So are you, yeah, you mentioned, a book a little bit earlier, but are you reading anything at the moment? Anything interesting?
I'm always reading something. Yeah, I mean, I typically have a nonfiction, a fiction book on the go at the same time.
Yeah.
So what did I just finish? I finished a book called Alchemy.
Okay.
It's a business book. It's by a guy named Rory Sutherland, who is I think he's the vice chair of Ogilvy in England.
Okay.
I stumbled across him on a TED Talk. He's given a few TED Talks. He's a really interesting, charismatic, off the wall Brit.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote this book, and it's called Alchemy. And he talks about how people actually live and react to marketing and branding. And I thought it was really interesting. He's funny as hell. He's really, really smart. And it was just a great book. So I just finished that one. I just started one called The End of Stress. It's written by a guy named Don Joseph Goey, who used to work at Stanford University. And it's a really interesting, I read his story about his story first. And then I found his book, and his story is he's a guy who was, had a really high level job in a university. I think it was Stanford at the time. And within 1 week, he lost his job because the funding for the research he was working on was cut off. And then he was diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Oh my God.
So this guy, and this is 20, 30 years ago, he totally changed his outlook on life, and decided he was going to focus on stress. So he's written this book that I just started, and it's really fascinating. And he talks about a lot of different examples of people that have dealt with stress or not dealt with stress. And I thought that would be a good time to read that book. So
yeah, any good tips from that one? I think we're all doing that.
Yeah, he has simple routines, and I think one of the things, and I think Brock, you talked about it in your article. It was on LinkedIn. Is the idea of practicing gratitude. And this was a guy who lost his job and was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Started practicing gratitude, and I went, holy crap. So that kind of thing, being grateful for what you've got. I've been a meditator for a long time, so he talks about that. He talks about managing expectations, being aware of people, and he lives by a very simple credo that's gratitude, kindness, and paying attention to people. And I think it's, at first I kind of go, it's way too simple, but then you read it and go, sometimes the simple stuff is best in perspective and in creativity. So that's
absolutely.
And then I read
really good tips. Sorry, go ahead.
And I read lots of fiction stuff. So I just bought a book called American Dirt. That's supposed to be pretty interesting. So I'm going to start that probably later tonight.
Is that like a crime novel or something, or?
It's actually it's really interesting. It's kind of a mystery, but it's a story of a journalist who has a family in Mexico, and he has to get on the run from the cartel because he writes the wrong article, and his family tries to get into the U.S. and it's all about that. So it's a little bit of a mystery, but it's also about culture and modern times.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a nice escape.
It is. You need to escape.
What's something that most people don't know about you, Stephen?
Well, you already picked up on it. The fact I was born in France. I was.
Okay, there you go.
I actually had dual citizenship until I was 21.
Yeah.
So we moved around a lot. I said the meditation thing surprises a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm a bit of an open book, so I'm not sure how much I surprise people anymore. But yeah, I think it's the born in France was probably a surprise to a lot of people. Yeah, I'm a huge sports fan.
Green Bay Packers. I know that one.
Green Bay Packers. Well, as a kid, I lived in New York State, and I started watching. A huge baseball fan and NFL fan. So I'm really consumed by that. And as I said, at one point, I wanted to be a Go Falcons. Yeah, at one point, I wanted to be a sports journalist. I've maintained a huge love of sports.
Well, a Sens fan though too, right?
Love the Sens. Actually, I worked for I wasn't an employee of the Senators, but I helped with a lot of their early marketing when it was.
Oh, really?
It was tough marketing such a crappy team, I'll tell you. But it was I worked there.
once the team first came to town,
What's that?
basically, like 93 or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, I bought season tickets in '93. We worked on the campaign when they moved into what's now the Canadian Tire Center.
Yeah.
It was called the Palladium back then. So
yeah,
it was a lot of fun. I got to go on some road trips with the team.
Oh, that's cool.
And they had some crazy characters back then. Boy, you had to be careful. But no, that was
no doubt.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
I remember the Palladium. That was huge for Ottawa at the time, right? Like Farmers Field to that.
It was a really interesting story because they I don't think a lot of people remember how difficult it was to build that arena because there were a lot of environmentalists. They wanted to shut them down.
Mm-hmm.
There was a non-business friendly government in power in Ontario at the time.
Yeah.
So it was a real challenge to get that place built. But that was the whole concept of how they got the team. It was based on real estate, not population.
Well, didn't they purchase that land basically when they initially created the team? Like they had that land for a while, I thought.
Yeah, they had this big parcel of land, and they did it purposely to get the team because they thought they would be the anchor. But I hope somebody writes. There have been a couple of books written about it, but I hope somebody writes a book about it someday because the stories of them negotiating on a lot of that land, because back then it was mostly farmland.
Yeah.
So they're negotiating with families that have had a farm in the family for a number of years. So it was pretty interesting negotiations over real estate.
I think Bruce Firestone was pretty involved with that. I think I've heard him talk about it a few times.
Yeah, he was still involved when I was working with them, and he's an interesting guy.
Yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
No doubt. So I know a lot of our team. I mean, you've met them. A lot of them are been with the company for maybe a couple of years now, or freshly out of college. Maybe their first job. What's some advice you'd have for some of our team members
that are just starting out?
Yeah, like for if you could give yourself advice at their age, what would be some advice you'd have for them? At this stage.
I think there's a couple of things. One is I've always been a big believer in mentors, and I purposely tried to find some mentors when I was starting out, and I was really, really lucky. The first agency I got hired at, the guy who was the creative director I went to him and said, look, I'm a sponge. I just want to learn. So he was a great mentor to me. And over the years, I've still got mentors, I've still got people that I reach out to. So people that a small group of people that you respect, who you can go to for advice, especially when you're starting out, because you're going to be, I don't think I was prepared quite for the level of, immaturity that I saw in business when I first got into it. So having people that you can sort of call up and hang out with and you respect, and that'll help you, I think, is a big part of it. So mentors for sure, and be careful who you pick as a mentor. But it's somebody who can help you along the way. So as I said, I had a couple right off the bat, and I've stayed in touch with people, and I've still got them today. The other thing I think is trying to build a network. That's I've been doing this for a while, so I've got a fairly significant network, but I think there are times when, again, it's somebody you want to talk to, or it's strange. A lot of our clients just don't know how to get stuff done, and they'll come to me and I'll go, yeah, I happen to know somebody who does this or that. So I think a network is a big part of it. I mean, I've been pretty fortunate. I've essentially been a self-employed since I was 27. So, I've never had to really look for a job. But I have had to look for work. It says client work. So that network has been really helpful. So, if you can find mentors, you can start building a network as early as you can. I think that's great. And then I think the other thing is just how you approach a career.
Absolutely. No, I agree with those so much. And like personally, like that, I mean, the mentor thing definitely resonates with me. Like, I mean, you could look at Eddie. I mean, we're business partners, but he was, significantly older. He had business experience and that kind of stuff. Like he mentored me into being a business owner, which took time from an employee, like to change that mindset and, and be able to be a doer to managing and all these kinds of things. Like it does not happen overnight, right?
Nope.
This is
And
things that took years.
sometimes you can find people that, for instance, because I'm more of a creative guy, and people think people don't understand numbers. I have a pretty good understanding of numbers.
Yeah.
But it was, having a mentor that said, I was able to go and say, tell me how to read a financial statement or look at a cash flow forecast or that kind of thing. And it's, if you have the right mentor, you understand it. And to this day, I can understand all that stuff. I sure as hell don't want to be an accountant, but
yeah,
you understand that stuff. Or even, managing people, HR, things like that you need people you can call on.
Yeah, that's not easy, right? HR. And for me too, it was sales. It was like when I first started selling websites, it was $1,500 website, and he's like, go in and ask for 5,000. I'm like, are you crazy? I can't get 5,000. You go in, you ask for 5,000, no problem, right? It's the exact same thing, and you're like, okay.
No, I mean, there's but as I said, you've got to be careful who you decide on as mentors, because you can get some pretty shitty advice too if you're not careful. But
or people taking advantage, right?
The other thing that I was going to say is, especially in our business, and I'm sure it's the same in your business, is build some resiliency into your don't make the lows too low, don't make the highs too high. Because I know that it was funny to me, a lot of the people that I went to school with, they weren't in the industry 5 years later. Because it can be tough, there can be a lot of pressure, there can be a lot of criticism. If you're really thin-skinned and you let yourself get beaten up too much, you're not going to last in the industry. So build in some mechanisms to protect yourself when you can.
There's definitely ups and downs, and with marketing, like as much as anybody, you can go in there with a solid creative, solid strategy, and it doesn't always pan out as you had hoped, right?
Yep.
There's guarantees. So how do you deal with that? How do you approach that?
I think a big part of it is about setting levels of expectation. What we can deliver and what we bring to the table. It's funny. I was doing a presentation to somebody who's thinking about a rebrand last week, and one of the things I went through, I said, from our experience, here's 5 ways this project is going to fall apart. We can control 2 of them. You guys control the rest of them. and even if and if you're aware of that and you can go through it, I think it's really good. But even sometimes when you say that up front, they still ignore it. I mean, in our industry, a big part of it is because we do the strategy, we do the creative, and then a lot of times we just kind of hand it off to people. And it's execution. And when I do the pure consulting work I do now, it's all about, an idea is only as good as the execution of it, right? Or a shitty idea well executed is still a bad thing. But sometimes it's just you don't get the work done. And I was talking to a not-for-profit client that was all pissed off at us. And we'd given them the stuff, but they never executed it. So it essentially sat on a shelf. So but that's a difficult conversation to have. So
not every campaign is going to be a home run, right? Like, for us, it's SEO, right? There's no guarantees we can do the same thing 10 times over. You're going to get the same results, right?
Marketing is the same thing. You can't guarantee it, but if you're strategically smart, you're creatively out of the box a little bit, and it's flawlessly executed, you've got a lot better chance. Because again, when I look at campaigns that don't work, it's one of those things. There was no strategy. It was too tactical. The creative was Me Tooism, and the execution was poor. It's not complicated.
Well, and I think what's really neat about what you're saying is you can go into a client now from your experience, be able to tell, okay, here's what potentially might go wrong. I think that's the ultimate transparency, like being able to have tough conversations. And you're able to do now. For me, when I started in business or when I was even younger, I could not have tough conversations. If there was some kind of like an issue, I'd be more prone to run away and not face it. I think it took a lot of years for me to hit it head on, or even get ahead of it, right? Conversations, I think.
What's interesting? And this is a piece of advice that I learned a long time ago, is that the creative business is a tough business, but you have to look at it. I think the perspective has to be is, you're not just lucky to get hired by the client; they're lucky to have you. And I think you need to look at it that way. Is that And I'm at the point now, if we don't get hired, the first thing I usually say is, well, they just made a big mistake. But I think part of that is self-preservation, but you also have to go, and I know you guys do this, is you bring value to the table, right? So we're not just out there, sort of flogging stuff. You have to go in with that attitude going, they'd be lucky to have us. And we kind of look at them and go, because we're not going to work for 1 million clients. We're going to have a select few clients. And I'd rather work with somebody who goes, yeah, we're happy to have them. So that's part of it. But I totally hear you on the going from a $1,500 to a $5,000 web. Same thing, the same thing when I was starting out is it was tough to do it, but I go, you got to pay for somebody who knows what they're doing.
Well, you start realizing all the expenses and you see your value too, right? Like, an hour of your time, you can get a lot more done in an hour than someone who's just starting out too, right?
Yeah.
So there's value there too.
I have a friend who's got a great expression. He's a creative director from Toronto, and I saw him, and I was in a meeting with him years ago, and the money thing came up, and he looked at the potential client and said, "You know what? It's okay if you can't afford me. Come back later," and that's he wasn't going to discount himself.
Yeah. Hey, it's time. Like you said, there's only so many clients you can take in a day, right? So
yep.
Make
so
it worth your while.
yeah, exactly.
So I was hoping to open up the floor. If anyone has any questions, usually I know the account managers love asking stuff, but any of the other the team wants to ask a question, just take a shot.
I'm gonna go first, if that's all right with everyone. I have
well, not Derek.
So I actually have a few questions, but I'm just gonna go with one of these.
Okay.
So the meditation thing. So I told a lot of people at the office when all this stuff started happening, working from home, all the stress of the business challenges.
Yep.
I downloaded this meditation app and I started using it, and I was tracking and I was using it every day. I think I used it 7 days in a row, and I stopped using it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to continue using it, but I don't know, maybe my stress went away or kind of helped mitigate the stress. But can you tell us a little bit about because the benefits I found were like in the moment, it would calm me down. I'd feel a little bit better. Can you tell me about how meditation's benefited you?
In a number of ways. I'm I think about a lot of things, so I've got a really active mind. Sometimes to my own detriment. But I think it's reduced stress in my life. I think it's helped me cope with it when things are difficult. And I just find you're a lot more balanced than you could be. So my routine is I get up fairly early in the morning. I'm usually up by 5, and I'll meditate for at least half an hour every day. I haven't missed a day in 3 years. So I'll do that, and sometimes throughout the day I'll do it. For instance, if I'm walking into a big presentation, and I had one not long ago before all this stuff happened, where one of those massive boardrooms, and it's like you're in front of the Supreme Court, and I sat in my truck, and I just for 5 minutes before I walked in, I just went, I'm just gonna breathe and think about it, and it clears your mind, because if you do what I do or what you guys do, there's always a lot of stuff going on. Brock, you'd know this too. It's not just getting the work done and getting clients and worrying about paying bills. It's a lot of stuff, and sometimes your perspective on things becomes much clearer if you can take time to meditate on it.
Right. Awesome. That's good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else got a question at all?
Yeah, actually I have one. Hey, Stephen, how you doing?
Hey, Alex, how you doing? Good to see you.
Can't complain. You too.
Yeah.
So yeah, with all your years of experience being head of creative and just focusing on hospitality as kind of one of your main industries for your agency, how do you keep your ideas and your campaigns fresh and coming up with new ones and constantly trying to improve on ones you've done before instead of just kind of becoming a broken wheel and repeating the same thing?
That's a great question. I think it's a number of things. I mean, at one point, we were handling 30 different hotels. from St. John's and Newfoundland all the way out to Vancouver and Victoria. So I think it's just making sure that you take the time, and that this is where the strategy comes in. Is although it's a hotel, every hotel is slightly different. So being aware of the strategic part of it. And I always look, I think the mistake that a lot of industries make is they only look inside their own industry for inspiration. So I think we've always been pretty good at looking, even though if you're working for a hotel or a not-for-profit or a risk management company, is to take a look at what else is going on in the world besides what's going on in their world. And I think the other part is just becoming aware of, we'll quite often go, now we use that idea or that approach for somebody else. So just trying to push yourself, but it's easy to fall into a rut. When we were doing 30 hotels at the same time, you can only write about meeting space so many ways. But I think, if you do the upfront work and you go, this is the way we're going to position this property or this client, you're aware of that. So that influences all kinds of things. How do you treat the visuals? What kind of language do you use? For instance, the hotels we work with in Ottawa, we're working with 3 of them: the Lord Elgin, the Carlton Suite Hotel, which is a business hotel, and the Metcalf, which is a boutique hotel. So we wrote essentially a messaging platform. So the Metcalf speaks as a sort of funky downtown boutique hotel. It's all craft beer and local cheeses and things like that. Whereas the Lord Elgin is where Winston Churchill stayed. So, you look at it that way and go, well, you can write in a certain tone for the Lord Elgin that you can't use for the Metcalf and vice versa. So it's just trying to be aware of that kind of stuff and stay fresh. Look for ideas. Love to read, love to watch movies. There's sometimes you watch a movie and go, that's kind of an interesting approach to something. So you can apply that somewhere else.
Does that make sense? Awesome. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you very much. Actually, a quick follow-up question I thought of. Have you ever had, say, another hotel or different client that mentioned a campaign that you had done previously that didn't know it was you? Like, oh, we want this, or like something kind of like that?
Yeah, that has happened.
Nice.
And we'll normally refuse. No, we'll always refuse. It's not normally refused. A couple of things. I don't think Me Too marketing works. If you're copying somebody else, then you're sort of the second-rate version of that same thing. So, and I think that you just deserve to be an original. So, we resist that. But there's a lot of, we call it Me Too marketing. You see it all the time. If you look at how much of the media used to advertise itself, to me it was funny. In radio stations in Ottawa, they were all on the buses. They all had the same type of advertising. They all had the same type of messaging. And I remember saying to somebody who ran a radio station years ago, that's why you guys struggle, is that you're not taking the time to be different. So it's just part of a philosophy.
I like that. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And for those of you who don't know, Stephen actually referred Alex. He was a teacher in Algonquin, and he referred Alex to us. Great referral. Thank you.
Yeah. Speaking of growing out your network, eh?
There you go. That's right. I taught at Algonquin for a couple of years now. Students.
Yeah, great teacher as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question at all? I see Rory maybe coming on.
Yeah, you called me out. Hey, Stephen, my name is Rory. So I work in the advertising department here. And, a lot of stuff that you were saying, it really resonates with me as a former sports writer and journalist who moved to the dark side of advertising.
Wow.
Yeah, and a big fan of the David Ogilvy book too. And just you talking about it kind of reminded me of a quote that he says, where he says that what you say in advertising is more important than how you say it. And, things have changed from when Ogilvy wrote that book to now. I mean, advertisements, products, all this stuff, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So I'm wondering, when you're coming up with a specific tone, a message for your clients, are you sticking with one kind of idea and kind of just catering it a little bit to the platform, if it's a billboard or, a cell phone, something like that? Or are you coming up with, individual strategies per platform? Like, how are you getting the brand's message out to the audience in the most effective way as possible, if that kind of makes sense?
It makes total sense. Well, I think our approach is, if we start with strategy and planning, for instance, and I'll use, say, Cardell, who we work with you guys on, is what's the overarching strategy? Where do you think you're going to have to send your messages out to? So with Cardell, it was, we use billboards. It's mostly digital, select print. And to be aware of that when you're developing the messaging. Because some campaigns have to be sort of multi-platform. Some can be, almost one or two platforms. And just be aware of, is that flexibility being built into the campaign? And one of the things that we look at from our creative messaging is, we always say, does this have legs? And by legs, we mean, could we run this campaign for a year or 2 years? And can we apply the fundamental creative strategy to multiple platforms? So will it work in outdoor? Will it work in print? Will it work in digital? Depending on what you do. So it's is the core message there, and can you adapt it in certain ways?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, no, that sounds great. And if I can, just a follow up as well.
Yep.
I think you made a really, really good point by saying that, sometimes you need to be more noticeable than your budget allows you to be. So, I think that would apply to anything, whether, it's an image or a piece of ad copy, something like that. Do you have kind of a tried and true, method for, following this? Like if you're severely under budget, but you have a really big ask or a big audience, what kind of tactics or what kind of mediums do you kind of like lean towards in order to overcome that challenge?
Other than
do you shock people or?
Well, yeah, I think so. You try to, but to me, shocking is relative.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, to be shocking in a retail environment, you can push the envelope a lot further than if, say, you're in the insurance industry. So to me, it's sort of relevance. How far do you want to push the envelope? And I think what helps clients understand that is setting the perspective or setting the landscape and going to them, like the Spark Street Mall example I was using. We went in and said, the retail center is outspending you 10 to 1.
Right.
Here's all the other advantages they have over you. They're an indoor mall. Ottawa's, in a northern country. So to set the level and say, you need to be prepared to be a little bit out there. So I think you have to get the client to nod. And our point is, you always move them further than they were currently. And the example, I will give you an example that's current, is I just finished writing what's called a case for support. And it's a fundraising document when an organization is trying to go out to raise a bunch of money. So this particular case for support was for a campaign that's around $15 million. And when I read all their background stuff, they're a healthcare organization. They are the worst communicators in the world because they talk to themselves. Yeah. But one of the things I said them was, okay, so you've got this campaign that's worth about $15 million. I read everything you've written over the last 3 years. The Ottawa Hospital at some point will be launching an $800 million campaign. They're going to suck all the philanthropic money out of this community faster than you can imagine. So you need to do something that is going to be a lot more noticeable. So be bold, be visionary, don't be this quiet, fantastic group of people, but they've been really quiet and sort of navel gazing for too long. So we presented something and said, you need to really push things. That's okay. All. No. There's a concept called creative leveraging, where the basic concept is everybody spends the same amount of money to run an ad on the Super Bowl, right? Or to buy, Google ads or Facebook ads or social media ads. Everybody essentially pays the same kind of money. The way you can leverage it is by making it more noticeable. And that's more applicable now than it's ever been, because the number of commercial messages that we see every day are mind-boggling. So if you're not creative and you can't stand out, you're not really leveraging your spend.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, okay. I'm going to squeeze one more question out of you just because topical. So you're talking about Me Too marketing. And, the first thing that pops into mind is how we are all facing these unprecedented times, and times are tough. What kind of language do you think, advertisers, marketers, that kind of thing, can use to really stand out in this you know, kind of this COVID era, this pandemic kind of age? I know it's $1 million question, but, you know, what are your thoughts? How do you think people can kind of get above the fold there?
I think it's just being aware. You know, it's that's true in so many instances. It's just being aware of what's going on out there. I don't think people are typically open to hard sell. So I think you have to be kind of a little more gentle, a little more cognizant of it. I mean, I think everybody respects that, you know, business has to go on and business has to generate revenue. But I think, you know, don't be totally clueless about things. And there was one of our clients wrote something this week that didn't get posted, but they were using language that I just said you got to tone that down. Like people are gonna because they and it was actually kind of funny because they used the word contagious in a completely different context. And I went, I don't think you want to use that word today. They're going to call you. You know, and I think that the thing is that you see a lot of stuff. Politicians are renowned for this. You're just not aware of the you haven't got your finger on the pulse of what's going on. So I think you just need to be deeply aware of that. Don't be, you know, be respectful, understand that people are going through a tough time, and try to make sure your marketing mirrors that. I don't think you stop marketing, but I think you just maybe you change the tone a little bit. Look at what some of the automotive companies are doing right now with some of their advertising, you know. And people we live in a time where everybody's a critic, so you have to be really careful of what you're doing. But I'd be aware of it.
Yeah, and for sure. Like I saw a commercial for Burger King the other day, and it starts off and it's just all the fast food workers inside Burger King. You don't see a customer, you don't really see any food, but you just see that everybody's wearing the protective safety equipment, you know, face masks, gloves, all that stuff. And they kick it off by just saying, hey, we're here and we're here to help you and make sure you're safe. They don't show the food, they don't show the customer, but they just say, hey, you might not be thinking about us, but we're here. And just at that moment, I went, I really want a Whopper right now. Like this works. So yeah, no, I think it is a combination of just being aware and kind of, you know, empathetic at the same time. So yeah, thank you very much for answering the questions. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Wicked. Thanks, Rory. I sent in the chat, there's one commercial that was Uber did a commercial recently. Actually, my wife Faith saw it and she said it made her cry. I was like, well, it didn't make me cry, but it was a pretty good commercial. It was a premise of thank you for not writing right now, right?
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. One of the best examples ever, and I'll just digress here for a second. It wasn't even necessary. It became a marketing campaign, but during the 2008 financial meltdown in the markets, Hyundai came out with their campaign saying, if you lose your job in the next 3 months, you can return the car, no questions asked.
I think I remember that, actually.
And their market share like that. And it's never really dropped back down. So that's a company where they go, we're paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, not pinching pennies. And, you know, actually on a social media group I'm in today, thousands of social media specialists, and Sprout Social was giving someone a hard time. They lost half their clients or something. They're like, can I pause my plan or work? They wouldn't, kept charging, all this kind of stuff. So they put in their social media post, everyone in the group is now against that company, and that will fester, right? Across the board. So you have to be very understanding in this time, for sure.
Well, they're totally clueless. I don't know what's going on. So they've got their head up their own asses. A friend of mine.
Exactly. Does anyone else have a question? Amanda, you usually have something.
I do, but I have a meeting in 2 minutes, so it would have to be really quick. My question was actually, obviously you're a writer, you have a content background. We do a lot of writing here. My question is around kind of like getting on the same page. You know, if the client is not loving what you're writing and there's, you know, some challenges in getting approved, if you have some advice for content team, whether it's more about like planning and making sure that you're on the same page before you even write a word, or if you have kind of approaches on how to get content approved when you're not quite on the same page.
I'll try and keep that really short. To me, there's two things. There's when you're writing something, the comments are either going to be subjective or objective. And I always say, if I got something wrong, tell me and I'll fix it. If it's just a matter of style and you know, your opinion on things, you hired me to write this. So if you don't
Yeah.
want to write it yourself. I mean, that's a lot more blunt. But I'm saying, you can't have too many authors. So I always go, if I've got something wrong or I've misstated something, tell me. If it's a disagreement in style, then we need to have a conversation about that.
I love it. There you go, content team. Have fun. I like that one. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay.
Does anyone else have questions for Stephen? I think it's the last one because we're almost at 1 o'clock.
Oh God, we are.
Time flies.
I'll take the last
All right,
question
Lisa.
then. Hey, Stephen, I'm an account manager here at SEO Plus. Just talking more from setting the perspective and working with decision makers, do you have any recommendations for merging the creative strategy with more of the overall business strategy, especially when you are pitching to the decision makers who maybe are more business minded and not so much creative minded?
Yeah, be seen as being business sensitive and business aware. So, for instance, when we start working with a client, assuming it's a significant client, I always say, "Can I read your business plan?" So you have to show it. To me, it's a two-way street. You have to say, "I respect the business strategy, and I'll make sure I'm aware of that before I incorporate that into any sort of brand strategy or communication strategy." Because if the marketing or branding or whatever you're doing isn't advancing the business strategy, then you really shouldn't be working together. So
Exactly. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
I think clients appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, if you're getting up in the C-suite, whoever he or she is, if they're the CEO and you express an appreciation for what they're doing from a strategic standpoint, then that's going to help you when you go back and talk to them. And frankly, it helps you too, because you don't want to be surprised by something that you didn't bother reading.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Stephen, we've come to the end of our time. Listen, I want to say thank you so much for this. I mean, always great. We always have great chats, so it's always appreciated. And hopefully everyone, learned something today about you and a little, about your experience and stuff. That's really cool. If people want to reach out to you, is there any way they can get in touch with you at all?
I'm all over LinkedIn, so you can find me there pretty easily. And check out our website, but start with LinkedIn, because I make sure I'm up to date there, and you got all my coordinates. And I think I'm already connected to a number of you on LinkedIn, but start there.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much, Stephen. Great chat, and I'm sure we'll be in touch very soon.
Yeah, we will. Time went fast. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Thank you.